taking all the sunshine, bottle up the rain.
Today's panel was conceived as an ode to National Museums Month. And quite frankly, and I was sharing this with one of our panelists a little bit earlier, it was a controversial topic in that there were questions relating to the relevance and the audience appeal. But the CAFÉ committee persevered, and apparently so did all of you. So thank you so much for joining us today. When I was a child, my earliest memories were of my neighborhood public library. It was there that I learned that there was a whole big world out there to explore beyond my neighborhood. And next was the Museum of Art, and then the Children's Museum. The Science Museum soon followed, and my love for diverse cultural institutions has been ever present in my life, in the lives of my children. Here's a quote from a local cultural arts blogger, and it's also an ode to museums. There is something about museums that makes me feel like I'm at home. There is something about all the stories behind the works of art. There is something about museums. I've been fortunate enough to travel to many states and cities and experience various cultures firsthand. Visiting cathedrals, churches, synagogues, mosques, and museums was always a given when traveling with my family as I grew up. Doing the research in the hotel lobby after breakfast was always my job before we set out for the day. These experiences allowed me to fully embrace the belief that learning about other cultures was extremely valuable and vital for becoming a good human being. I always found the most comfort once I would pass the chaotic line to get tickets and entered the first room I could find in that museum. The shift from noise to low murmurs was the cue for me to start absorbing everything I could. So today's CAFÉ is not only an ode to museums, but also an ode to libraries, schools dedicated to the arts and culture, and indeed to all of us who relish in the experience of exploring, engaging, and learning from all they have to offer. And on with the show. You have at your places a program for today, and we have 7 esteemed panelists, so do take a look at their bios. These are, happens to be all women this month. These are highly experienced folks that are with us today, specialists and leaders certainly in their fields. We'll begin with Carmen Centeno, and I'm going to do a brief overview, giving you only their titles. I trust that you will read their bios, and then we're going to talk a little bit about their institutions, and then on with the program. Our first panelist is Carmen Centeno, who is the Library Services Specialist for Community Engagement at Miami-Dade County Public Library. And pulling from the mission and vision as indicated for the Miami-Dade County Public Library to deliver quality services reflecting the informational, educational, and recreational needs of a diverse community, with a vision that the Miami-Dade Public Library system is to be an innovative, user-centric community anchor that provides opportunities for lifelong education, exploration, and discovery for all of the residents of Miami-Dade County. Next, we have Caroline Parker Santiago, Executive Director of the Coral Gables Museum. And that museum's mission is to celebrate, investigate, and explore the civic arts of architecture and urban and environmental design, including fostering an appreciation for the history, vision, and cultural landscape of Coral Gables, promoting beauty and planning as well as historic and environmental preservation for a broad audience, including children, families, and community members, as well as local, regional, national, and international visitors. And next, we have Dr. Tina Menendez, Vice President of Education from History Miami. And History Miami Museum is a Smithsonian affiliate. It is the premier cultural institution committed to collecting, preserving, and celebrating Miami's history as the unique crossroads of America. Moving on to Evelyn Pierre, Executive Director and founder, I believe, of Haitian Heritage Museum. Founded in 2004 to commemorate Haiti's bicentennial, the Haitian Heritage Museum is a 501c3 organization and is committed to highlighting and preserving Haiti's rich culture and heritage globally. Our goal is to provide a cultural mecca for Little Haiti, where individuals outside of our community and within our community boundaries can come and to enjoy beautiful Haitian art, historic artifacts, and ethnic sounds of Haitian music, view Haitian films, and enjoy a collection of Haitian literary works. Lucia Williams, Chief Innovation and Experiences Officer for the Miami Children's Museum. Also a 501c3 nonprofit educational institution which meets the needs of all children in our multicultural community. The museum offers interactive exhibits, programs, and learning materials related to arts, culture, community, and communication. MCM encourages visitors of all ages to play, learn, imagine, and create together. Kylie Crook, Director of Education for the Bass Museum. We present contemporary art to excite, challenge, and educate. The Bass is Miami Beach's contemporary art museum, focusing on exhibitions of international and contemporary art. The Bass presents mid-career and established artists reflecting the spirit and international character of Miami Beach. And last, but certainly not least, is Ms. Karen Chisholm, Magnet Lead Teacher, Southside Elementary Museum's Magnet School. Southside Elementary is committed to providing a culturally diverse learning environment in collaboration with museums throughout the community. A humanities-based curriculum infused with museum resources and expeditions provides hands-on, minds-on, authentic learning experiences, taking students beyond the walls of the classroom. And on we go. We've opened with an overview of each of your school or institution's missions and goals. So let's begin there. How would you describe your institution's ability to meet the stated mission, visions, and goals? And may we begin with Dr. Tina.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. I think what we try to do is we try to tell Miami stories. Miami is diverse. Miami is filled with multiple people with multiple narratives. And so what we're trying to do is how do we tell those stories, both from the ancestors that came here before, to the natives, to present, and so who embodies those people that are here. And so through programming, through our exhibitions, and through a lot of our outreach, we're trying to connect with different communities that have these different stories.
My students participated in the history where they told their stories, and we did it in our garden. It was an after-school group that would normally just be sitting doing homework or whatever. We all brought food from our respective cultures. Some of it we used our garden vegetables and herbs that we grew, which really connected us to Miami because we grew it in Miami. And we sat down and their parents came, and for an afternoon we told each other our stories. And that never would have happened if we weren't so closely aligned with History Miami, because they really understand exactly what you said, what it means to tell one's personal story. As well, I just want to applaud how History Miami, as well as many others, connect. We align teaching and learning to the district pacing guides so that when we are working with museums, the teachers are not off the pacing guides. For example, 4th grade studies their state, so History Miami brings their map program, the Florida map. Hispanic Heritage Month, they bring Saludos Amigos to our school. 3rd grade studies the world, so they bring their world map program. In that way, we can connect teaching and learning into a whole new way, constructivist methodology. By the way, my students are at the Coral Gables Museum right now.
Speaking of Coral Gables.
Okay, so segue to Coral Gables Museum. So I'm Caroline, Coral Gables Museum. And just to recap, our mission is not just to celebrate the 1920s planned community of Coral Gables, but also all the things that kind of make Coral Gables a special place, especially the built environment. So architecture, urban planning, sustainable development. We as a museum present exhibitions and programs, lunch and learns, guided tours, city tours that connect to our mission, support our mission. As the visitor center for Coral Gables, for tourists, we offer, and also for residents, we offer Gables bike tours once a month, every third Sunday of the month. Waterway canoe tours. We get people out on the very privatized Coral Gables waterway and teach them about that, the history of that man-made waterway. We do exhibition tours and downtown walking tours every weekend, and that's just for some of our adult programming. When it comes to thinking more in terms of K through 12, we do partner with the schools, and we offer our Green City program, which is focused on sustainability when it comes to building and city planning. And we also offer local history tours for schools, which is often our fourth grade audience. And when it comes to the younger audiences, because our mission is really to serve everybody from 0 to 100, we offer Family Day, which is every second Saturday of the month, which is free, and we just waive our admission costs and let the kids come in, and that's really very friendly for any kids under 5. And we also recently, just last year, inaugurated the Dream City Studio, which is an interactive children's gallery where kids can come in and touch and build and read and draw and connect with our mission in a way that is a little bit more kid-friendly, and think about things like architecture and urban planning and explore that in a more kid-friendly way. So these are just some of the things, and I also want to mention City Trekker Summer Camp. We take these kids all over the place, not just Coral Gables. Our first field trip this summer is going to be to Frost Science, another great museum that just opened up. So we try to take these kids all over the place and just build their awareness about the cultural landscape here in Greater Miami, as well as the built environment. Thank you.
Okay, I'll talk about the bass on that note. As our little vision mentions, we are embracing the internationality of Miami as a city. So we do present contemporary art, but we also have a collection, a permanent collection that was donated to the city of Miami Beach, and thus created the bass. So that's mainly Renaissance and Baroque art. And then we also have our famous mummy. So I don't know if you've ever come to see it or not, but it's very exciting. So we use our collection and the contemporary art to make connections internationally in the world, and also with the kids' culture and or adults when they come to visit. So it really brings their reality to the museum. So we make all these connection points during the tours through context labels, and we've been closed for the last almost 2 years now. So we're going to reopen in the fall with a brand new museum. Basically, we're taking out the ramp, and we have thousands more of exhibition space, and we also are creating an education wing. So we're going from 1 classroom to 3 classrooms, which is very exciting for us. So we're going to utilize those spaces to continue our mission to excite and educate and challenge. So when you present contemporary art, it's not always easy to follow. It's not always easy to get those concepts. And this is where we want to come in with context that is easy for the kids to understand. We also will be offering classes or lectures or anything for all ages. For the last 3 years, we've been focusing on early childhood, and that's been really exciting. We really wanted to focus on getting them young, getting them into the museum so they can start seeing, viewing, and feeling like the museum is home to them. And so we've been working in the community since we've been closed. We've been in 13 sites working with parents and their young ones from 2 to 8 years old. And because we've been closed, we've been busing all of those families to other institutions. So we've been to the Perez, we've been to History Miami, ICA, a couple of other places, so that the families in the community feel like museums are their home and that they can connect to them.
Carmen.
From the Miami-Dade Public Library System. And the library, it's a wonderful place. You know, it's a welcoming place. It strives to offer something for everyone. And we have diverse collections and services and programs to meet our diverse communities. And we strive to connect with our patrons. We reach out into the community. We have a web page where our patrons can learn all about our information. Our goal is to be able to provide that information, recreational needs that our community desires, and we offer classes to teach for pleasure. So the Miami-Dade Public Library System it's always thinking of its customers and reaching out to them to make sure that we are offering what you need.
I just want to interject as something that we've been working with the libraries very closely for the last 3 years since we've been closed, and they've opened up the Miami Beach Library to us. Basically, we've taken over. They've given us office space for our education team to work out of, and then the Miami Beach Library also has a UMake space with 3D printers and just really amazing equipment, and they allowed us to host a spring camp there. So we had 80 students that we bussed in from all over the Miami metro area to use their UMake space and just took over their entire library. And they've just been the best at opening their doors to every crazy idea that we had to get going.
Thank you. Yeah, we believe that forming partnerships with the community is very important to be able to bring great programs for our library. Thank you.
Thanks, Carmen. Evelyn.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Today is such a special day as we celebrate International Museum Day, but it's also Haitian Flag Day. I actually just came from another event, but this whole entire month, if you see any bags underneath my eyes, it's just we've been working like very hard. But what we do is create cultural relevant partnerships. We do that through education, technology, and the arts. And of course, it's so important for us as a Haitian community who actually came to South Florida in a disadvantaged way. A lot of the people came here through the boats and everything. So with technology, with everything is moving through technology, we want to really make sure that our community is at an vantage point. So for the past 3 years, we've actually been doing that through our partnerships with the different entities. We partner up with the National African American History and Culture Museum that recently just opened. We did an exhibition with them when they actually did their launch. That was back in September. We also do a lot of cultural, important, relevant partnerships because right now, as you know, or you don't know, Little Haiti actually is going through a regentrification process. So we actually have an exhibition right now, which is so amazing, with Eddie Ororo. Eddie Ororo is actually not of Haitian background, but he is the one who actually is archiving the old buildings and reflecting the artwork on those old buildings, and we actually did the exhibition. And talk about partnerships, culturally relevant partnerships, we actually just partnered with the City of North Miami Beach Library. We did an opening exhibition called Toussaint Louverture, and that exhibition, we did a partnership with the National Museum of Haiti, and that exhibition is going on tour right now, and it's actually at the North Miami Beach Library. So we do a lot of outreach in the schools, and of course we do a lot of field trips. And I love doing the field trips because the students of South Florida, it's just not just Haitian students, but it's always great to see the aha moments of the children who are not of Haitian descent when they come to the museum and they have a great experience, and when they send us their thank you letters or their cards. It's really interesting how all the fabrics of the different communities, whether it's the Cuban community, the Mexicans down in Homestead, the migrant community, they all have like a common thread, which is culture. And our culture is different in some ways, but it's very similar in food. So all of that is really, really important. And that's how we believe we can tell our story. Because being of Haitian descent is so many times you can tell that Haitian story, but we need to actually tell the story of cross-pollinating the different sectors in South Florida, because again, we always seem to be operating in silos, but I think when we do the connection, this is how our community will not have like a divide in the future, because these kids are basically thrust into the community. We feel that when we start them young, that we will be looking at a very different South Florida, and it wouldn't be like so much silos. But most of you guys actually worked with them before, and that's what we do at the Haitian Heritage Museum. We do have a private collection. We're trying to expand it. We're actually trying to look for something else later on, but I guess we'll get into that. But that's what we normally do, and Haitian Heritage Month is very, very busy. And for this month, we actually have an art IT talk, art and innovation talk with the artists, Eddie Aurora and some other community leaders of Little Haiti, talking about how art actually transforms communities and actually is part of the economic growth. And then also we have a poetry and talent, showcasing all the talents of the artists here, whether you're a visual artist, performing artist, during Haitian Heritage Month, and that's happening on May 25th. So there's a cadre of events that we do, but this is our most busy season because, again, this is where the Haitian culture is on full display.
Thank you. And Lucy?
Hi, so I'm with the Children's Museum, and our mission states that we aim to meet the needs of all children in a multicultural community. And that word multicultural is really special to us. Our target population are children under 8 and their families, so we're dealing with a very young audience, and what we find is they're still defining what multiculturalism means. In fact, they're still defining what their own culture means, right? And I think we often use words, mainly nationalities, right, as the things that define culture, and we think it's a lot broader than that. It's especially living in a place like Miami where people aren't Brazilian here, they're Brazilian American. You know, you're not Cuban, you're Cuban American. I really appreciate what you said, Evelyn, about the similarities. So that's what we're doing. We do a lot of in-house training with our staff to make sure that our floor staff is comfortable with these words, these definitions. They know how to talk to children, they know how to address children that look different, that are dressed different, and really try to hone in on those similarities so they can exist in this society, understanding pretty much that multiculturalism is really fun and exciting. It's something you should own, but above all that is that we are living in the same culture and we're all the same people. So I'd say that's our goal there that we like to focus in. And as others have said, we do have in-house programs, we do outreaches, we do camps, so it is reflected through all of our different programs in the museum.
Thanks, Lucy. I do want to remind the panelists to please speak loudly into the microphone. We have a very full room today, so we want to be sure that everyone can hear at the back. Panelists, our next question relates to the creation of exhibits and collections. The late Paulo Freire, Brazilian educator, author, and philosopher, reminds us that looking at the past must only be a means of understanding more clearly what and who we are, so that we can more wisely build the future. We in the community would like to know that we can count on our local museums, libraries, and cultural institutions. And what is your school or institution doing to make sure that your programming and creative content is being curated and perhaps co-created by the community you represent? And how does the museum curator authentically engage with the community? And that would be curator or curators. And the floor is open.
Okay. For us, like I said, we do a lot of culturally relevant partnerships when we do our exhibitions. We do have a private collection. Normally we do exhibition twice a year, doing Haitian Heritage Month, and of course then for Art Basel. Our private collection, what we have basically primitive artwork that which was donated, and we have some level of artifacts. So it's so important for us to actually reach out to other more, I guess, more museums that have a lot more items than we have. So the perfect connection was the National Museum in Haiti, and that's the Mupana. And we've done 2 exhibitions with them so far. And the great thing about it is the way we do the exhibitions, we are able to keep the materials that we created the exhibition with, and then to be able to travel it. Like we traveled the Toussaint Louverture exhibition to the City of North Miami Beach Library. The other way that we do, we work with local artists here in South Florida, because again, the local artists, they do have a story to tell. And this is when we do Art Basel, because again, when people think of Haitian art, they normally think of like the primitive style of art. However, there's a lot of contemporary Haitian artists, and their work is just phenomenal. And that's the time that you can actually showcase that. And it works two prongs, because a lot of times when you have the visitors that come for Art Basel, they love the contemporary cutting edge stuff. But then when you invite your community, and they come and they see the artwork and they're just like, this is not Haitian art. And I'm like, well, what is the definition of Haitian art? Is it an artist who created Haitian art? Or is it art that is done to reflect the Haitian community? So that's always been like it's been a tug, because again, you know, the people that come when they'll see like a contemporary exhibition that we did our very first Art Basel show. It was ShamWow, and it was done by ELC, Victor and his brother, and they were like half Jewish and half Haitian. And it was a bunch of ShamWow converts around and ShamWow in the middle of the floor. So they couldn't really understand that installation exhibition, but that audience that follows that contemporary artwork, they totally got it. So that's how we do our exhibitions, and we're always looking to highlight our local talent to be able to give back to our community so we can give our artists a chance. And of course, partnering with other highly regarded institutions like the Smithsonian. When they did their opening of their museum, we had their traveling exhibition, which is a poster exhibition, which we still have, so we can continue, you know, bringing that particular exhibition into the schools for Black History Month. So that's how we do our exhibitions, and it's been working well.
Thank you.
So like most children's museums, we are not collections-based museum. And again, because of our target population being young, that is partly because children at that age learn more through interaction and being able to touch objects. So we do object-based learning, but it's not necessarily what I think of a collections exhibition with things behind vitrines. Also, half of our kids are pre-literate. You know, they're just too young. So we really shy from putting labels on things because it's just not the kind of interaction they're looking for in our museum. What we do, though, to engage them is when we go through exhibit development processes, we really try to create exhibits that require collaboration. And what we're looking to see, there are families that may physically look different, interacting with each other, collaborating to solve problems, to build something, to achieve a certain goal.
Thank you, Tina.
You had talked about solving problems. I think the other thing that Freire also talks about, he's deceased, but is about the banking model of education. And so this depositing. So I have all of the knowledge and I'm depositing it into you. And so I think that as institutions, as libraries, as schools, what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're valuing the people that are coming to the institution for the stories that they bring. And so in our exhibitions, in our programming, that's what we want to do. That's what we're striving to do. And I think everybody here would probably agree that it's a work in progress. We try something, we see if it works. If it doesn't work, why doesn't it work? We have to be reflective about how we're meeting the needs of our community. You said to meet all children and to meet the needs of all communities. And so how do we do that? How do we make dynamic programming that is actually relevant? And so what does that mean to be relevant? What does that mean to make meaning? And so a couple of things that we're trying to do, especially in our programming and in our exhibitions, we have Hurricane Andrew, the 25th anniversary opening on June 1st, which is going to exhibit multiple stories from multiple angles, from people from Homestead, from musicians to farmers, to dynamic group of people telling the story from their own perspective and collecting artifacts and donating for that. But then in our program, we also try to partner and work with different institutions. So we worked with the library. I'm bringing Congressman Lewis here and his co-authors for March. And that was an amazing thing where we also partnered with the public school system, and 1,200 students were able to actually experience and hear him speak and get a book, and they actually had a book in their hand prior to coming to hear him speak. And so we're trying to create those kinds of opportunities. We also do Family Fun Day, tethered to our museum exhibitions or not, to our local artists. We also try to highlight local artists from different cultural groups. We have Serge Combs is going to lead a workshop this summer. And so we try to do a lot of different things like that to engage the community and make it relevant, where we're valuing what different members of the community are bringing to the table and their stories, because we don't want to be, most of the stories that have been told traditionally in institutions have been from a conqueror's perspective. And so how do we value those people that actually come from various groups, and how you, why you said that your museum started, I think is profound. I think we have to acknowledge that. And so it's a work in progress. And so with our exhibitions, we have Hurricane Andrew that is brand new, June 1st, but then we have one from the 80s that has some things that are told from the 80s perspective. And so how do we do that through school programs? We lead tours through that exhibition called Tropical Dreams, but we do a school program called Making Miami Home. And with that, we try to bring and tell the different stories that aren't told on the museum walls.
Thank you.
Perfect. So every program that the library offers, it's always followed by a program evaluation, because we definitely want to know what our customers want. Are they happy with the program? Do they want to see something else? So that really helps us in our planning, in assessing how we need to move forward, so that we're meeting those needs. And at the same time, we see that our customers are helping us develop the library that they would like to see. In addition, just to let you know that we have a programming department with dedicated librarians who are focusing on looking for programming that's appealing for the community. And so they do the administrative work, the research. We also work with our branch managers at the local level, at the branches, and they provide great feedback. And also with our patrons, we look to engage with them locally, and many of our patrons help us come up with book clubs, and they lead the book clubs themselves, and of course with our guidance, or anime clubs. And so that's a way that we do an arts and crafts. We like to include our customers, our patrons, to help us create better programs.
Thank you, Caroline.
Okay. So, I mean, on this idea of multiculturalism, but also, the community that you serve and how it is you're really connecting with that community. The Coral Gables Museum, in regards to collections and exhibitions, the collections at the Coral Gables Museum were pretty young. We opened in 2010 is when we moved into the old police and fire station just up the street from here. And so our collection is still forming and growing. And it's exciting because I get things sometimes every day. Someone walked in the other day and gave me a prayer book. I opened it up and it had Solomon Merrick written on it. It was Solomon Merrick's prayer book. And that's George Merrick, our city founder's father, who was a congregational minister. So it's exciting, but it's still forming, and it's very much community sourced. And much of what we have been doing, especially when it comes to the exhibitions, which are much more, are much more mature, I think, in our organization's life with our exhibitions, is very much community sourced and through collaborations with different community members. And I'll give you a few examples. We did an exhibition on Temple Judea. Temple Judea is right here in Coral Gables. It's on US 1, beautiful building. You've seen it with these geometric arches designed by Morris Lapidus. Well, that's our first Jewish congregation here in Coral Gables. We partnered with them. They selected the curators. They provided a lot of the artifacts, and we presented their story. And it was a wonderful exhibition that shed light on this particular facet of our community. Another exhibit we just did this past year was Cuban architects of the Modernist generation. This generation of Cuban architects that was very much alive and thriving in Cuba, and then after the revolution ended up in places all around the world. We partnered with University of Miami School of Architecture, an architecture professor there, Victor Dupuy, who is Cuban American, the son of two Cuban architects of this generation. So people came from all over the country to come and see this exhibition. But again, it's a reflection of our community here in Coral Gables. We're about 50% Hispanic here. And so The Villagers is another exhibition we did. We presented The Villagers' 50th anniversary. And if you don't know The Villagers, they're a nonprofit organization, and they are a historic preservation organization. And they started right here in Coral Gables by saving the Douglas entrance, which is still here today. That was the first building that they tried to save that ended up being the impetus for forming the villagers. And this is, again, a totally different demographic. These are a lot of older, white, non-Hispanic women that are kind of like old Miami, okay? A really great group that's also very well represented here in Coral Gables. So we try to make sure that we are connecting with lots of different audiences and telling their stories, so that no matter who comes into the museum, you're discovering the story, maybe an untold story, or a story that you weren't particularly familiar with. But I think it allows the opportunity for audiences to connect. And I think museums, as well as libraries, share a lot of the same ethics in that respect, and really try to be fair and be open when it comes to educating the public on our histories, and the multiple histories that we have.
Kylie, I think you wanted to share.
I was just gonna note that everyone is bringing up the process of storytelling and how important that is, and kind of your exhibitions, you want it to be able to relate to the populations that are coming to see it, but really, if you're bringing in contemporary art and unless you're giving it context, unless you're providing an opportunity to tell stories and to link stories, then it's not going to mean anything. So yes, bringing in collections that relate, but the storytelling and the work is in the education. We're all our educators up here and possibly in this room, and that's our work, is to link what is happening in Miami or in our community, in our state, in our country, to what they're seeing on the wall. And so we just have to make sure that our educators and that the people that the kids are seeing who are helping build these stories and the storytelling reflect what they look like and what they see. And also important to meet them at their language or their culture, so that we are always aware as our educators of the cultural diversity of Miami, and keeping up with the times and being current and doing professional development, which is what you guys are doing here, right? It's very important.
Okay, I'm going to try and be a little bit brief because I know the issue of time. And I'm going to take the conversation to a national level, which is the educational system. And Southside Elementary being in the Magnet Schools of America program really started out with the concept of inclusion. If you think back to the film Fame, that's about the first performing arts school, which of course was in New York. Things always start with the arts, we know that. So they figured we can take different populations of people and put them together, imagine that, for the purpose of something that they're both interested in. And it worked out pretty well. And test scores rose, attendance rates were better, graduation rates rose. Miami-Dade County Public Schools is a model for success in this arena. I can't even tell you how many magnet and in-school programs there are. As was stated early, we were the first museum magnet school, and I've worked with all these institutions and just love them. And so there is a new buzzword that I heard when I had to write this huge paper for. We, by the way, have won the Magnet Schools of America School Distinction for 6 years in a row. And that was culturally literate. They're not using so much the word multiculturalism anymore, because what our goal is not to know about your culture and, oh yeah, we had tacos on Cinco de Mayo, or, whatever. But to be sensitive to what that means, Well, okay, so you have it because that's Mexican food. Well, why is it Mexican food? And what do you know about this? And now all of a sudden I can start studying and give me a subject and I can teach it from it, corn. So being culturally literate is really, really a huge thing. Our school is in the Brickell area. We used to be thought of as, east of La Habana. And now we have kids from all over the world walking arm in arm and hand in hand down the halls and playing together. I also researched, what is a museum? Because I was going to be with a bunch of museum people. And I went to the American Association of Museums website. And what I really liked was the second bullet point, which said, a museum, in order to be accredited, must be essentially educational in nature. Wonderful, right? So it dawned on us about 2 years ago, I think it was, we talked about it, that we're a museums magnet school, but we're a school museum, and our collection is children and books and stuff and gardens. And so our motto is that we explore, we examine, we exhibit, and we experiment. And so we really consider ourselves a museum also. I just want to find a real quick point. I wanted to address what you started out with in thinking that maybe this is not such a subject. My training is with the Smithsonian Early Enrichment Center in Washington, D.C. I worked extensively with Sharon Schaefer. They bring the kids like as soon as they're born in the Early Enrichment Center. And the whole thinking behind it is that memory, which is learning, is usually strongest when attached to an experience. So if I say, what's your favorite food? You might say pizza. If I say, what was your best meal? Well, it was my anniversary and we went to this, and now you're going to start telling me this whole rich story because there's meaning behind it. So if I want a child to, I used History Miami. Your flyer has Hurricane Andrew on it, and I was with a group of gifted kids, and I had to sub like last minute. So I said, what are you learning? And this one kid said apostrophes. I said, come on up to my room. And I just turned Hurricane Andrew upside down and it's apostrophe. And so we did this whole lesson on that. It was great.
Thank
So,
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then to expand a little bit, the whole intersection of museums and cultural institutions and education is going to be a big part of our conversation today. Let's move a little bit to talk about access. Who has it and perhaps who doesn't? Is that a perception? Is that a reality? Shakira is quoted as saying, I'm a closet nerd. I love to study history and I love to visit museums. Many of us have at least that much in common with Shakira. But how did museums become nerdy? In fact, art appreciation in and of itself is often looked at as a privilege for, as Paulo Freire would also say, the intelligentsia, the privileged. How do you intentionally engage and welcome visitors of all backgrounds to your cultural institution? And can we start with Tina, please?
So I think the heavy lift is on the institutions. I think a lot of times, I used to work at the Field Museum in Chicago, and a curator once told me that the extent of education should just be the label that is next to the exhibition case. And if you can't read it and if you can't understand it, then it wasn't for you. And he's no longer there. But so what we're trying to do is we would have to do that heavy lift. So how do we do that? Caroline talked about free family fun days. We do those as well. And I think that right by itself is equity and access. We're opening up the institution to all kinds of different families, to all different kinds of means, and giving them an exposure to an institution for free. And how do we do that? And so how do we communicate that? For the first time, our Family Fun Day flyer is in 3 different languages because we wanted to make sure that it was in Spanish, it was in Haitian Creole, and it was in English. And so that's one small thing that we could do, but I think the other way that we can do it is that we have to consistently be reflective of what we're not doing. Why aren't we engaging? And so how do you create these windows? How do you create these doors? That door might work really well for somebody who is under 7 feet, but if somebody is 8 feet tall, can they walk through that door? Does that mean that they don't deserve to come into this room? No. So what do? How do we figure out ways to engage with the community and what's relevant to them? That doesn't mean that every exhibition, that doesn't mean that every program is going to fit for everyone. It just means that how do we create different avenues and different mechanisms so that we can give them access. And so I think that heavy lift is on the institutions, is on education, is on exhibitions, is on those people that are planning those programs. We also try to do museums without walls. And so I know that a lot of us try to do a lot of outreach with different organizations. We also do city tours. And so how do we bridge that gap? And going back to what you were both saying about common humanity, differences are not a negative. I think that's the other thing that we say all the time, that differences are a bad thing. It's okay that we have differences, but what are all the things that we have in common too? What's that shared space? And so I think Monica Montgomery was somebody that you were going to bring up later today. She does a pop-up museum, but one of the things she talks about is how to have a third space. And so is that charge on the museums to be a third space for equity and access? Is the charge of the museum to pull up their sleeves and wrestle with some difficult concepts? It doesn't mean that we have to take sides, but we can at least produce a space to have people have those conversations. And so I think that lift is on all of us here and all of you to hold us accountable to make those things happen. If it's not happening, why isn't it happening? And if we're not seeing a bridge to you, help us figure that out.
Thank you.
Hi. I love what you said. It's so amazing, all the points that you made. But for us, it's really interesting because we get a lot of our students that come in through different field trips, either it's a charter school or just a regular school in Miami-Dade County. And a lot of times those students are like first-time museum visitors. And it's just, it blows me away. I'm like, okay, this is your first time. And then as you talk with them and you're like, well, what did you learn? And it seemed like they're disengaged because it's like myself as the museum educator and it's the operation director. So when the museum educator is, going through the lesson, what is culture or IT expose, and they kind of seem a little disengaged, they get a little excited, and then you're like, well, did they get anything out of this? And then when you start pooling them, like, okay, how many of you been to a museum before? And it's very, it's surprising that half of the room, they haven't been to a museum. So I believe that, and I know all of you guys are doing wonderful things to engage the community, but we're missing it some kind of way because again, we're like a little baby compared to all you guys who are doing wonderful things in the community. And for their first experience to be coming to the Haitian Art Museum, it's kind of like, what is going on? So when you talk to them and you engage in them and you're like, okay, what did you learn? And they start telling you like, well, museums are this, that, and the other. And I learned about this exhibition that Little Haiti once was this, now is that. It really empowers you because you're like, wow, what you're doing is relevant. And for a first-time visitor, they're getting it. So I think if we can continue to offer that to them, it would be wonderful. And to talk about the Museum Magnet program, because we were actually doing the Museum Magnet program in North Miami with W.J. Bryan, North Miami Middle, North Miami Senior. And when we first started that program, I think North Miami Middle was like a D, and then North Miami Senior was an F, and W.J. Bryan was sliding slowly or quickly from a C to a D. And the one story that I can tell you, which among many, is that we worked closely with the W.J. Bryan and the third grade class. And it was kind of like a lot of, talk about these difficult conversations. A lot of times, the school might have some kind of trajectory that they're doing. And, the lead teacher have their own ideology. And then you have an institution that's coming in where 99% of the population is of your background, which is Haitian. And we had a lot of pushback, to be very clear with you guys. And, no pun intended with all the other museums, they wanted other museums. I'm like, well, okay, this is great, but I really believe this population is going to learn from us more because we are them, and not to say that they can't learn outside, but again, you start there and then you open it up to the other institutions. Long story short, one third grade teacher was very adamant. She's like, no, I want to work with the Haitian Heritage Museum and I want you guys to help us, whatever. Long story short, her third grade class, when it was the FCAT, I don't know what they're taking now, Common Core or whatever we're doing now, her third grade class, scored the highest FCAT score for the entire Miami-Dade County because they work with us. And I'm not saying that it was just us, but I really believe because the kids were able to connect with the materials that we're doing, the object-based learning that we were doing, and the different projects that we were doing, it really helped them identify who they were to be very, have self-esteem, because I think that's the biggest thing with Haitian American kids. They, their parents speak a different language. They're, working several jobs. They go to the school. The library is kind of like after school program, unofficially, officially. And it's like they don't really know their place. But when you have an institution that comes in and you speak their language and you do the object-based learning and you do the critical thinking learning, they pick up stuff that they will not normally pick up with other people. Like, okay, like how do you go snow skiing? Are you kidding me? They don't even know what a snow boot look like. So when you bring in objects that are culturally relevant to that student, they are able to learn quicker. And like the young lady was saying, that they learn through experiences. So when you have the tangible objects and then you teach it to them and you have them touch it and they learn it and you give them all the skills, sets that are associated with that, they learn and they learn big and they never forget. So that little story really empowered me or our organization as a whole to really understand like what we're doing is relevant, and what we're doing for the kids is helping them to be able to navigate in society and not just in one facet, like in the Haitian community, but to be very positive students and also to contribute as they get older to the economic fabric of South Florida. That's what happened. Yeah.
We can do one more response.
So I like to speak on that just because I think we have a slightly different angle. So when it comes to access, at the Children's Museum, we like to position ourselves as a gateway to other museums. And I had quite a paradigm shift when I went to work there, because previously I worked for a science museum and a natural history museum. So I got there, I'm like, what is this? And it was hard for me to make sense out of it. How is it museum? And then, not surprising, a lot of visitors would ask me the same question. Why are you a museum? You have a slide and you have, blocks. Like, where are the collections? So it was a little bit challenging. But the more I studied and the more I worked there, I understood probably something that I had always known. It just took me a little while, which is you have to know your audience. Right? You have to know who you're serving. So when we're serving these children that are very young, to give them access means making museum accessible to them. And yes, I agree with what everybody said in terms, physical accessibility, cultural accessibility. But I'm also thinking in terms of how does a child learn to navigate a public environment? That's huge. A lot of kids, especially in our, very heavily Latin community, kids are being raised by their grandparents. They're often at home. They don't start school until it's mandatory school. So they come to our museum, and this is the first time they're interacting with other families in the public. So that's a huge one. Another one is making sense of informal education. I think that's huge. I think that again, it may be obvious and familiar to us, but I think for a lot of the visitors, they don't really understand. They are more familiar with Natural History Museum that may have real dinosaur fossils, right? Like, yeah, of course, that's education. But we are also doing education. I just think it's at the early childhood level. And then lastly, I think owning public institutions is a huge part of accessibility. We have had many programs where we're busing in people who are not our traditional visitors, 3 days, you name it, but really giving them the ability to understand the public institutions are theirs and that they should get to know the staff and they should relate to the staff and they can email us, they should learn our names and create a multi-visit opportunity. I think those are things that the Children's Museum is really focusing on right now in terms of accessibility.
Thank you.
If I could just respond to that. Just a really quick note. We work together, and well, a lot of us do, but specifically, the power of play with young children. Now, we talk, we plan all the museums that we go to, but let's just use this as an example. We communicate, we've established relationships, so I, as an educator, can look at many people in this room. Already we're gonna make our appointment, that here in Miami, I just have to say, it is such a special educational community with that I have enjoyed with the museums, we don't get any money, zero, for dues and fees or tickets. So I've gotten really good at putting that out there. They're paying for, we don't have to pay. They are providing free programming for us, as many of the museums do. And that's just an amazing opportunity.
Thank you, Karen. Kylie.
I just wanted to bring the point home for everyone that's here or listening or watching that our answer to you is usually yes first. So any ideas that you guys
Yeah.
have is yes. And then we work back to no if we have to. But we try to come up with ideas. We try to come up to you. We're trying to meet you. But you guys should totally feel comfortable coming to us because our answer is most of the time yes. And if we can't figure it out at that moment, we will. And if it's not for a year, we will do it. You know, if we need bus money, we'll go out and find it with you. So the answer is yes. You just have to come to us. Just make the time where we're willing to meet with you at any point. The answer is yes.
Thank you. Moving on from access to accountability and responsibility, and this question is actually geared toward Carmen. The Newberry Library, a famed research library in Chicago specializing in the humanities, collected signs from the Women's March on January 21st, 2017, to be part of a new collection focused on recording the social turmoil that has rocked the United States in recent years. How does the Miami-Dade County Public Library System see itself as our community historian and as perhaps the epicenter for educational resources for the county?
Thank you. I think we play an important role, right? The library plays an important role preserving our local history. It's important that we do this because we do provide free access to information, right? So we want to make sure that we have the information, the content to help our customers because it is free. So for the library, it's very important. And so we have special collections focusing on the Miami-Dade County in Florida. And just in case you're not aware, we have some of the special collections that we have. One is called the Bazaar Ii Project, and it's a Miami-Dade County. It's a art history. It's art history from 1945 to the present. And there you can visit the library and learn all about that. And we have it available for you, dedicated to documenting, collecting, and preserving Miami-Dade County's art history. In addition to that, we also have a permanent art collection of art pieces that we also feature throughout our 50 branches. And we also have local document collections of the documenting the first building codes in Miami-Dade County. So it is very important, and the library is currently working on digitizing this information so that we can make it even more accessible to everyone. And so, as a matter of fact, we currently have a digitization survey on our website that you're welcome to take, and letting us know what you would like to see part of that as part of that project that we're working on. So
Thank
definitely
you.
we encourage you patrons to take it. Thanks.
Thank you, and that's a great segue. How is your school, library, or museum responding to the digital age? How do you envision libraries and museums evolving to more dynamically tell the stories of society? And what do the museums of the future ideally look like? And the floor is open.
Okay, since we kind of made that turn 3 years ago, because that's what we saw, where everything was going, not just museums, but tourism, everything was going towards the digital age. And about 3 years ago, we got a great grant. I want to say from Museum of Americas, we wrote 2 grants, and then we got one from the Museum of America and the Knight Foundation, where we actually started digitizing our collection. The funny thing about digitizing is like when you start, it doesn't seem like you're gonna ever end, because the first grant is like, okay, yeah, we got it, it's going great, da da da, and then you're like, whoa. Then the next phase, you're like, okay, we're right on that target, but then it's so much more to digitize and to digitize it correctly. So we actually started the first and the second phase, and now we're trying to get to our third phase. The other thing with where it's going, I really believe that maker spaces in the museum space or the library space is really going more towards innovation. I'm not sure if you guys heard of that museum in New York called the New Museum. Have you guys heard of it? New Museum been around for, I guess, 40 years. And it seemed like they just got on the block. And when I say that, because they're so cutting edge, like all the ideas that I'm thinking, oh my God, this is a great idea, da, 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 and then I go on their site and I'm like, wow, they're doing it. So basically, I think technology and innovation is really going towards that way with museums, because they actually opened an innovation center, I want to say in 2014, if I'm speaking correctly. And basically, they have like the museum is on one side, then they have the innovation on the other. And basically, they have different artists, visual artists, people who are creating things in technology, part of this whole environment. And this is where, you know, our line of thinking is, because we see so much creatives out there, and we're like, well, how do we harness that creativity and get them, you know, market ready or to create like a business with this? So I really believe the technology is the way of the future, and I really believe Haitian Heritage Museum, that's where we're heading. Because again, when we see technology, it's like you can't even get the kids to pay attention for 1 second. They're like, you know, always on their PDA. And not even just the kids, but we do the same thing too. Half of you guys are probably on your PDA now, or while we're up here, people are still sneaking, working with their PDA. So we really want to be very innovative to actually have that, that platform. So we just started a series called Arts IT, and it's basically Arts Innovation Talk. And our first talk is actually going to be at the end of this month on the 30th, and talking about how art is being utilized to change our communities and to drive economic empowerment. Because when you look at it, just let's take Wynwood for example. Wynwood started as just an art community. All the artists came in. It got really cool, you know, graffiti, and then all of a sudden now the artists, they can't even stay there. Now they're all moving to Little Haiti. So it's a process, and I really believe when you use technology to actually harness that process and to show people the way Eddie Aurora did with the exhibition, and, you know, to show that online, because we got so much visitors or interest about that particular exhibition, to show that internationally is really, really important. We actually did an exhibition with the National Museum of Kenya that was, I guess, 3 years ago, and it was called the Rites of Passage. And I don't know if you know anything about the Maasai people. Their Rites of Passage is basically getting circumcised at 15 years old. So we thought like, wow, you know, we do a lot of outreach with our students, so this might be a little graphic for them. So what we did, we actually did all the rites of passage for the different communities that live here. We partnered up with History Miami, we did Temple Bet Shalom. So we did the rites of passage from the Jewish, you know, from the bar mitzvah and bar mitzvah, the quinceañera with the Latin community, and of course, the first communion with the Haitian community. And what we did, we utilized like a RFID feed, and what the exhibition, all the parts of the storyboard, once you download the app and you utilize your iPhone or your Android, it takes you to a video that gives you more insight about that particular culture. It was phenomenal. And that's where I see technology going for museums. And I think if we're not utilizing technology in a very big way, we're going to become the dinosaurs of museums, because again, people are engaging very differently, and I think your space really is a blueprint now. And of course, with all social media, before it's like, don't take a picture, you know, the flash is going to damage the actual artwork.
Those days are over.
Okay, now it's like, please take a selfie with me. But here's my social media page, you know, Instagram it or whatever. So again, you know, we have to really change our thinking and our way of thinking to accommodate our new constituents, because their attention span is like, oh, okay, da da da. You know, we have the regular exhibition up, people are done in like 5 minutes and they're like, that's it. But then you're like, okay, well, let's take selfies. Let's do this. Let's do that. Hashtag this. It's more engaging for them that way. So
Thank you.
I think that's how we're going with technology.
Thank you so much.
I would be really interested to hear what Karen says about this.
Specifically, how do you mean?
Just
As far as technology?
like, how do you think your students would, I guess, gain more than they normally would at during a museum visit through digital technology, if you can?
Okay. Well, my students don't like my answer, and I don't know if you, I make them put everything away. I don't want them in the museum, out of the museum in any way. I want them in the museum, completely engaged in objects, authentic spaces and places, and collections. I'll give an example. No, you can't go on the computer. I have some antiquity blocks over there you can use in my after-school program. Children and adults, people, have opportunities and access, for the most part. The library, I'll make an exception to technology in so many ways. When they are coming to you and you're welcoming them with this amazing programming, and Miami-Dade County Public School teachers are coming to you with children that are thinking about these ideas that you have in your museums or your collections, your stories, in their core content curriculum pacing guides. What I like about technology, I love your websites. I love sending my teachers all of the pre and post visit. They're at Coral Gables now, and it was just an incredible pre-visit. History Miami's, I mean, it just goes on and on. Which historic site do you want to go to? Which this, there, we were talking, Kylie, earlier, I spent a long time on the Bass to see what's going on there. The Children's Museum, you rarely see kids with, because now kids are like this, swiping in the grocery line, you know, in the baby seat, on the iPads and phones. But at the Children's Museum, they're not. They're using the stuff. So,
Thank
I
you.
don't know.
Thank you.
So can I just say
Of
that
course.
then I feel like that ties back to curating for the populations and leaving it up to the artists of the world, these international artists. They're thinking forward. They're thinking of how they can translate their story through digital technology or whatever. So when we curate for that and we bring in an artist who does really interesting video work or really interesting digital interactivity, that's where it becomes meaningful for the kids, because that's the artist's intention and that's how the artist wants to tell their story. So it opens the children's minds to telling their story in that way, rather than just swiping through images really fast just to see it, you know. So I think that's interesting that you're saying that. And
Just to 1 second on that, my kids were just at ICA, and there was a short video, and they had never really seen. I mean, how many videos do they see? They're watching it all the time on YouTube. They sat there in this little room.
So
Just
much for the
stunned.
digital age.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah, artists making art and creating art and children experiencing. That's part of your collection. Yeah, that's so cool.
If
Thank
I
you.
can chime in and say something, I think all your points are very well taken, but I do believe not, you were saying technology is available to everybody. No, when you look at technology, it's a digital divide that's happening. So I do take your point in reference to, yes, with the installation, it's multimedia installation. I think that's correct. But a lot of the Black, brown children, they're not getting the technology. So that's another form of digital divide, and also with education, because not all of them have computers at their homes to do their homework. That's why the libraries is so important, and you basically got to kick them out. So I believe that that narrative is different for different segments of the community, but I think for our community, this is something that we need to bring them up to code so they can be relevant and be very economic, viable, positive citizens in our community.
Thank you for that important point, Evelyn. Panelists, as I predicted in my note to you last evening, and as you have now experienced, we typically do not get to all the prepared questions. We are coming close to the end of our time together today, and one of our biggest concerns or complaints from our audiences are that there's not enough time for questions. So I'm going to just very quickly move to a closing question, and then we're moving to a quick awarding of door prizes, and then we'll open the floor to questions. Very briefly, 30 seconds or less, what does the future of your cultural institution look like? And Lucy, let's start with you.
Right, so about 4 years ago, we engaged in a master plan of renovations, and we are little by little renovating everything in the building. So we have a lot new exhibits coming up, and I think you'll see that every time you come, you'll experience something new with and without electronic technology.
Thank you.
Where we are in our 13 years, we just celebrated 13 years, we're looking for a space, like a permanent place. So that's where our whole focus is, building our collection and really trying to archive, our story, our main focus on what we're trying to do. So we're looking for a space at this moment.
For the library, what can I say? We continue, our goals is to continue to serve the community's needs. And I'm not sure if you're aware how we have a bookmobile, a technology bus on the road. So it's there, we're reaching those communities that really need that technology access. And so, yes, and so we're thinking about our customers and seeing how we can always meet what their needs are.
I think to not just tell Miami stories, but receive Miami stories, and tell Miami stories, and to make sure that we're building bridges and we're connecting people. And so I think we're a civic institution, and so we want to make sure that we're serving in the exact same way that Dade County Public Library is talking about, how do we serve the community at large. And so that work is a cycle, it's continuous, and so that's where I would hope that we would go.
For the BAS, we're reopening our new space, so our future is to grow into the space and continue to provide excellent programs and exhibitions, context, stories, connection points, and really just to make our museum feel comfortable for everyone that visits. We want everyone to feel like this is their place, they should be there, and they should be learning through museums and visiting them all the time.
For the Coral Gables Museum, this is our 6th season of being open and serving the public. So we're really kind of looking at, okay, what do the next 5 to 6 years look like? We're focusing on the direction of our collection and expanding our audiences. I often say the Coral Gables Museum is your museum regardless of your zip code. We have members really from all around Greater Miami. So we're staying put in our building, the old police and fire station. There's a lot changing around Miami, but that's one thing that's pretty certain with us because we have a close relationship with the city and an operating agreement with them to stay and manage the whole first floor as the Coral Gables Museum. So we're just strategically planning for strengthening and expanding our current program offerings. Thank you.
For Southside Elementary Museum Magnet School, it's always the task at hand of ever expanding our museum partnerships. And I want to thank you so much for an event like this, because the cultural community and the community at large is really what helps make great schools.
Thank you very much. Well, let's go. We had several questions that were not, oh, we have one back in the back. Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming. I'm really learning a lot here. One of the comments that Tina made really stuck out to me, and that is that oftentimes the story of museums is the conqueror's story. And I would like, I want everyone to really think about that when you enter spaces, that you have to also critique what is being told and what is missing. I have a little one, and that's usually my question. If you see something, ask what's missing. What doesn't reflect the world that you live in? So I want to know, what exhibit or collection have you brought to kind of challenge these conquerors' narratives?
I can speak to that. We have some exhibitions. It was kind of a series called Endless Renaissance, where we use our collection and then bring in contemporary artworks next to it to kind of give a contrast or to bring a similarity together. So one really specific example was we have a white European male general sitting on a horse, and we paired it with Peter Hugo, who is, I believe he's an African artist, that he's sitting there with a lion. So it was really interesting to see those together, of like really powerful male figures coming from two totally different backgrounds, and then making those connections and doing the storytelling with the kids and asking about the similarities and differences. So that's a really specific example, but we love to use our collection to juxtapose it next to current images that reflect what the community looks like now.
One exhibition that we have right now is called Tropical Wildlife, and it's an artist called Brenda Keneally. She's a photographer, and she used to be a photographer for the Herald. I'm originally from Chicago, so I'm remembering this from what I've read. But she had a magazine. The Herald had a magazine called Tropical Wildlife, or Tropic, and then there was a page called Tropical Wildlife. And you Miamians, correct me if I'm wrong.
On the cover.
Yeah, it was Tropic Magazine, and there was a page called Tropical Wildlife. Thank you. But in that, she wanted to photograph people who identified on the margins of society, or created a space and place of where they found beauty, of whoever they are. There's from Marilyn Manson to a 90-year-old woman to LGBTQ activists to students to all different artists. And so that exhibition is paralleled next to it. There's an writer for the Herald who went out and interviewed them, but what she wanted to do was she wanted to interview the people independent of the photograph. So she didn't see the photograph, so she did it over the phone for a good portion of the time originally, so that she could meet them and over the phone and not have judgment. And so she was trying to suspend that. But through that, we partnered with 4 different Miami-Dade public schools. And so we partnered with Miami Northwestern, Felix Varela, Braddock, and Miami South Ridge. And so I gave them the proposal that she had written to the museum of what she wanted to do. And so they took that and they reinterpreted that into how they wanted to identify icons in their own community, in their own space, and interview them. And so Miami Northwestern did one about the mothers of lost souls. And so they did a video interpretation. So they interviewed mothers who had lost their children to gun violence. And so that's exhibited, and they also photographed them. Then we have a student from Miami South Ridge who wanted to talk about the Goulds and his community and why he found value in that, and that he wanted to have a counter narrative of how the Goulds are represented. And so he created an almost 26-page PowerPoint. And then he also photographed it and documented that. 2, we had another people wanted to do G. Holmes Braddock, who is actually still alive today. And so they felt that they wanted to honor him. And so we try to do that, where we're trying to work with our exhibitions team on what is currently being exhibited and how do we program that, how do we reach out to different communities, but then how do we work with students, how do we have them, sort of what we're talking about, the deficit narrative of this divide, this digital divide, but it's also an access divide. And so how do we help students, how do we help young early childhood, help them understand that these spaces could be theirs too. But we have to create the mechanisms and help them make meaning out of it. But we have to give them the tools to how to actually be critical thinkers and how to engage with what's on the walls, or give us pushback of why don't I see myself? I mean, growing up as a person that identifies as a person of color, I didn't see myself on TV and all the TV shows that I loved and all the TV shows that I liked. I didn't see myself in the museums that I went to. And so how do we navigate those spaces?
So I want to just share a little story about with the Coral Gables Museum's permanent exhibition, George Merrick and his vision for Coral Gables. So George Merrick is this, white northerner that moved down with his family when he was 13 years old, and they started the Coral Gables plantation. And the Merrick family hired a lot of the Black Bahamians from Coconut Grove, which is, of course, our oldest community here south of the river. And it was a few of the families from that neighborhood that George Merrick referred to as the way showers. And this exhibit is curated by historian Arva Moore Parks. And he really recognized the Black Bahamians for helping the Merrick family, who were coming from Duxbury, Massachusetts, for helping them, showing them the way on how to cultivate the land for this new business, which was going to be, citrus fruit and other vegetables and whatnot, because they were more familiar with this land and the tropical climate and how to do that. So they hired several families from that area. Later, when George Merrick decided to transform the Coral Gables plantation into the city of Coral Gables, he hired those same families to lay the first roads, build those first Coral Rock homes. So there was a historic, significance there. And within his planned community, George Merrick created the area today known as the Macfarlane Historic District, which is on the other side of US 1. It was a segregated part of the community because we're talking about the 1920s. But it was part of his community, and it became part of Coral Gables, still part of Coral Gables today. So that's a story that I'd like to do an exhibition on, to elaborate more on the Black history in Coral Gables, which today is not very well represented. Mm-hmm. It's a smaller segment of our population for, when you look at the city boundaries, but it plays an important role. Next month, as part of the Gables Bike Tour series that we do, we're taking people to that neighborhood on bike to expand upon that story. But in the long term, we'd love to do an exhibition coming up. So we definitely are trying to fill the gaps and tell it all the stories that need to be told, and not leave anybody out, and give credit where credit's due, and that does happen a lot. I think that does happen a lot. So hopefully, this new generation of museum professionals and library and educators are going to fill in the blanks, of history.
Thank you, Caroline. Mariana, and then our closing question with Charisse.
Thank you. I have a quick question for Carmen. If you can tell us a little bit about the museum's past program.
Yes, I would love to. Thanks for asking. Well, the Museum Pass program is a wonderful partnership, right, that we have with our wonderful partners. And by the way, if any partner who's currently not one of our partners wishes to form a partnership, just send me an email. We'll talk about that. But it's a great opportunity for our community to enjoy visiting the museums. And so to participate is really simple. You just need to visit your local library, make sure you have a library card, and they'll check to see, it's a first come, first serve basis, and so they'll check to see what's available, and then you get to check out that museum pass for 1 week, okay, and it expires at the end of the week, and that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Charisse.
I'm curious whether any of you are seeing the effects of sort of what I call the on-demand, on-delivery economy. Anybody who's been to Publix recently, you notice that most of the people in Publix are now shoppers for the people who don't want to leave their homes. You can get anything on Amazon. Like, we can have everything delivered to us, and people feels like not every community, the issues that we're talking about in Black and brown communities are completely different. But when you think about who the audience has been for cultural organizations, it's a certain demographic that is now being programmed in a society where I don't have to leave my house to get anything I want. Other people can shop for me, or I can have Amazon deliver it. And I'm curious whether you see sort of that pattern that technology has created impacting just people's natural inclination to go to a place to experience something.
I think we're seeing, yes, I think we're seeing that that happens, but I also think the opposite is also happening, is that too much is happening. There are so many options. I mean, you just heard just here today how many of us are doing so many different things. I think Caroline and I share a family fun day, and we also share it with the Little Haiti Cultural Center. So I think, too, we're also exhausting the demographics that can or want to come with so many different options. And so I think there's both things happening in tandem. And so again, I think it goes back to relevance. I think we have to seek to understand what is relevant and what is it that people want. And if the comfort of their own home is what they want to do, how do we build up how do we digitize our information so that people have access to it? But then how do we still cater to those that will come out? But I think, again, that's the heavy lift is on us. But I think it's a positive thing too, that so many amazing things are happening in Miami, that the competition is pretty high. And I don't use the word competition in a negative light. I use it in a positive light. I think that we all should band together to build one another up as well as support. But I think that is also what's happening too, is that people are just tired of 8,000 invitations in one day.
For our outreach programs, it's a family program where parents are supposed to stay and engage in meaningful ways. And we've had people that have walked out and never came back for two reasons. One, they wanted to be able to drop their child off and sit at the back of the room and be on their phone the whole time, and just you do the kid thing and I'll do the adult thing. That we have had at least 3 trainings for our teaching artists, our ambassadors, to navigate those scenarios and how to kindly and tell them that they need to disconnect, put their phone away, and come engage with their kids and all the things that come from that. So they've walked away, for one, that they don't want to engage with their children, and for 2, if we tell them to turn off their phone, they won't. Sometimes they won't come back. So we've seen that. We've seen that in a lot of the neighborhoods that we're in, but we're trying. We try to do it in a way where we explain the benefits of turning that off. But we've definitely seen that, and we're trying to figure out that process, which is why it's such a tricky thing with the digital technology in the museum and selfie spots next to certain artworks. It's just this fine line of, like, we know you want to do it anyway, so we should provide a space for you so you could say, this is your time to do your selfie or for you to be doing your cell phone thing. And then here's another time where maybe you should put that away. And that's where the BAS is with reopening, is figuring out where we're going to place ourselves on that line.
This is a great opportunity for me to interject that the coalition in the past year has kicked off a campaign that we call Unplug and Connect. And through this campaign, we're inviting families to put down their digital devices during dinner time specifically, but certainly during other times, and tune into their child. Actually, my daughter's Mother's Day gift to me was a trip to the Frost, so that's how we spent our morning. And as I was walking through enjoying this brand new addition to our cultural landscape, there was so many, there was full of strollers, but so many families on their telephones, and I was thinking, Unplug and Connect, we would invite any of you to display this at your front desk to remind families as they enter. We are winding down, regrettably. Will, I know you wanted to make a closing comment, and then we're going to ask the panelists to step to the front of the table, and we're going to take a group picture.